Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that's creating ripples all across Europe. The idea that Sweden's recent step, decision, or shift in direction is upsetting the European Union and triggering debates, reactions, and uncertainties. In this video-style script, we'll explore what this move really means, why it matters, and how it may reshape the political landscape within the EU. Everything will be explained in simple, clear language, with short interior paragraphs, and without any headings, labels, or scene instructions. Just a clean, natural script that feels like a real spoken presentation. Let's begin. When people talk about Sweden making a move that upsets the EU, they often imagine something dramatic or explosive. But in reality, the situation is much more layered. Sweden has always been known as a stable, cooperative, and consensus-oriented member of the European family. For years, it kept a balanced diplomatic tone, avoided unnecessary conflicts, and preferred long-term negotiation over sudden political shocks. So when Sweden takes a firm or unexpected stand on any major policy, it naturally draws attention from partners across the continent. The reaction is not just about disagreement, it's also about surprise. Europeans often expect Sweden to move in a predictable line, and when that line shifts, people want to know what changed. There's a growing feeling inside Europe that long-standing political alignments are moving in new directions. Member states have become more outspoken about issues such as border control, security, migration, national sovereignty, energy policy, and the financial responsibilities shared among EU members. Sweden, like many countries, has been pressured by internal political realities, public opinion, and changing global conditions. When a country adjusts its position on key matters, it's rarely because of a single event. Instead, it's usually the result of years of evolving debates at home. When Sweden takes a step that challenges EU expectations, it's often rooted in domestic pressures that the outside world might not fully see. Many European governments rely on Sweden for its traditionally moderate and rational voice. So when Sweden signals a tougher, sharper, or more independent tone, leaders across the bloc pay attention. Some view Sweden's assertiveness as a sign that stronger national positions are becoming more common across Europe. Others fear it may weaken unity at a time when the EU is already under pressure from global competition, internal disagreements, and shifting geopolitical alliances. That tension between national interests and collective decisions is a defining struggle inside the European Union. Every EU country has its own priorities, but the Union works by finding common ground. When Sweden adopts a stance that pushes back on EU-wide proposals or steps outside the usual cooperative rhythm, it can slow down negotiations that depend on agreement. This doesn't mean Sweden is trying to obstruct progress. It may simply be defending its own economic, political, or security interests. But in Brussels, where 27 members must coordinate, even a single firm stand can send shockwaves through the system. This is why Sweden's decision is being described as something that upsets the EU. It forces everyone else to rethink their approach. One of the major dynamics behind Sweden's step is the increasing debate over national sovereignty versus EU-level authority. Across Europe, people are asking how much control nations should keep and how much power the EU should hold over issues like border policy, financial regulations, and security cooperation. Sweden's decision fits into this wider pattern. There is a clear trend. Countries want more say in decisions that directly affect their populations. When Sweden moves in that direction, other nations see it as part of a larger pushback taking place across the continent. Another important factor is the shift in Sweden's domestic politics. The political map in Sweden has changed significantly in recent years, with new parties gaining influence and traditional centrist forces facing more pressure. These internal dynamics make it more likely for Sweden to take firmer positions internationally. When a government faces strong expectations from its voters at home, it adjusts its foreign policy accordingly. EU leaders understand this, but it doesn't make the situation less complicated. Once domestic needs override EU compromises, negotiations become more uncertain. The EU fears fragmentation because coordinated action is what gives the bloc its strength. If multiple countries take unilateral approaches or push back on collective strategies, the EU risks becoming weaker in areas like defense, trade, energy, and migration management. That's why Sweden's step is seen as so significant. Even if Sweden intends only to address its own concerns, the political signal it sends is much larger. Other countries may feel encouraged to take similar stands, and that could reshape the entire structure of EU cooperation. There's also a psychological aspect. The EU relies heavily on trust, predictability, and the assumption that nations will eventually align with collective goals. When a member like Sweden, known for its reliability, breaks from the expected path, it challenges these unwritten rules. It shows that even the most stable partners are reconsidering the balance of power between Brussels and national capitals. This realization creates tension, not because Sweden is acting aggressively, but because it reveals deeper cracks that already existed below the surface. Sweden's economic and social model has always been admired in Europe. Its approach to welfare, transparency, innovation, and governance made it a benchmark in many policy discussions. When Sweden takes a step that contradicts EU proposals, it carries more symbolic weight compared to a smaller or less influential country. The EU assumes that Sweden's choices reflect careful consideration, data-driven reasoning, and long-term planning. So when Sweden pushes back, it forces other members to question whether the EU's own plans truly reflect shared interests. Part of the reaction comes from fears about unity during a time of global instability. The world is experiencing economic uncertainty, rising security threats, and rapid geopolitical shifts. The EU wants to project strength, cohesion, and direction. Any sign of internal disagreement creates worry that the bloc might not react quickly enough to new global challenges. Sweden's move has intensified these concerns by highlighting the difficulty of maintaining collective strategies when national priorities differ. It's important to note that Sweden's decision doesn't mean it wants to leave the EU or challenge European cooperation overall. Instead, it means Sweden wants to ensure that EU decisions don't overshadow what it considers essential for its own stability. Many European citizens feel the same way about their countries. They want cooperation, but not at the expense of national control. Sweden's action resonates with these feelings, which is why it has become a symbolic moment for the EU. At the same time, Sweden is not acting in isolation. Many European countries have recently taken steps that emphasize national interest, whether on energy, migration, borders, or financial commitments. Sweden's decision fits into a pattern that is growing stronger across the continent. The EU must now determine how to balance this trend with the need for unity. If it adapts, the Union may become more flexible and resilient. If it resists, tensions may grow even further. The long-term implications depend on how both sides respond. Sweden may engage in deeper negotiations or adjust its stance depending on how the EU reacts. The EU may also reconsider its policies to accommodate national concerns. The key point is that the situation is far from settled. What looks like a conflict today could evolve into a new framework for cooperation tomorrow. The relationship between Sweden and the EU is still strong, but it's undergoing a transformation that will shape the next chapter of European politics. What's clear is that Europe is entering a phase where countries are more willing to voice their disagreements. Sweden's step is one example of a broader shift toward open debate, stronger national positions, and renewed questions about how much authority the EU should have. This doesn't have to be negative. In fact, it could lead to healthier, more transparent decision-making. But at the moment, it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty always makes headlines. Whether Sweden's move ultimately strengthens or weakens the EU depends on how leaders respond in the coming months. If they treat it as a warning sign and adjust accordingly, the result may be a more balanced union. If they dismiss or ignore it, the tension could grow and inspire more countries to take similar positions. Sweden may not have intended to spark a Europe-wide debate, but its decision has done exactly that. For now, all we know is that Sweden's step has shaken expectations and forced the EU to reevaluate its assumptions. It has reminded Europe that unity cannot be taken for granted. It must be continuously negotiated, respected, and strengthened through dialogue. That process will shape the future of the continent. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive explanation, be sure to stay connected for more detailed breakdowns of major world events and political shifts.